Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to another session of this course on Islamic inheritance law, in which we shall be looking at the devolution of vested inheritance known as munaska in Arabic. Let's start off with text from the Sirajiyah. ولو صار بعض الأنصباء ميراثا قبل القسمة كزوج وبنت وأم، فمات الزوج قبل القسمة عن امرأة وأبوين، ثم ماتت البنت عن ابنين وبنت وجدة، ثم ماتت الجدة عن زوج وأخوين، فالأصل فيه أن تصحح مسألة الميت الأول وتعطي سهام كل وارث من التصحيح، ثم تصحح مسألة الميت الثاني وتنظر بين ما في يده من التصحيح الأول وبين التصحيح الثاني. ثلاثة أحوال: فإن استقام ما في يده من التصحيح الأول على الثاني فلا حاجة إلى الضرب، وإن لم يستقم فانظر، إن كان بينهما موافقة فاضرب وفق التصحيح الثاني في التصحيح الأول، وإن كان بينهما مباينة فاضرب كل التصحيح الثاني في كل التصحيح الأول، فالمبلغ مخرج المسألتين، فسهام ورثة الميت الأول تضرب في المضروب، أعني في التصحيح الثاني أو في وفقه، وسهام ورثة الميت الثاني تضرب في كل ما في يده أو في وفقه، وإن مات ثالث أو رابع أو خامس فاجعل المبلغ مقام الأولى، والثالثة مقام الثانية في العمل، ثم في الرابعة والخامسة كذلك إلى غير النهاية. We must remember that inheritance is determined at the exact moment a person passes away. If an heir is alive at the time of the death of the propositus, that is, the deceased whose estate is being distributed, then that heir's share immediately becomes vested in him or her. Even if distribution has not yet physically taken place, the right to that share is already established in Sharia. Now, if that heir subsequently dies before the estate is actually divided, his or her share does not disappear. Rather, it becomes part of that heir's own estate and will be inherited by his or her own heirs according to the rules of Islamic inheritance. Similarly, in situations where there are multiple or simultaneous deaths, each death must be treated separately. At every point in time when someone dies, the shares are calculated afresh. The estate that had been vested in the deceased heir is then redistributed among that heir's rightful successors. In some cases, this means that certain heirs may inherit twice, once directly from the original deceased, and again through the estate of the heir who passed away. In other cases, the death of an heir may introduce new heirs into the matter who were not part of the original distribution. This process may need to be repeated if more than one heir dies in succession. At every stage, we apply the principles of inheritance carefully and methodically, ensuring that each estate is distributed in accordance with the divine law revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let us look at some examples to see how munashka operates in practice. In this first case, a man called Suhail dies, leaving behind his mother Amna, his widow Maryam, and a son called Khalid. Before the distribution of the estate, his son Khalid dies, leaving behind his mother Maryam and a son named Mahmud as his only heirs. So in this case, Suhail's estate is initially distributed to his heirs alive at the time of his death, that is, his mother, his wife, and his son Khalid. The portion vested in Khalid is then distributed to Khalid's heirs, that is, his mother and his son. The family tree diagram shows the relationships of all these heirs. Pause the video and see if you can calculate the final share distribution. We first calculate the inheritance shares when Suhail dies. His heirs alive at the time of his death are his mother, his wife, and his son Khalid. In the presence of a son, the wife, Maryam, inherits a Quranic share of 1/8, and the mother, Amna, inherits a Quranic share of 1/6. The son, Khalid, inherits the remainder of the estate, which is 17/24. The portion vested in Khalid is distributed to Khalid's heirs, that is, his mother, Maryam, the grandmother, Amna, and his son, Mahmud. The grandmother is excluded by the mother, who inherits 1/6 of Khalid's vested share of 17/24. The son inherits the remaining share of 5/6 of the 17/24. The final distribution, after adding the shares allocated to each heir, will be 85 over 144 for Maryam, 24 over 144 for Amna, and 85 over 144 for Mahmud. As you can see, even in a simple case, the calculations can be quite complicated. Let us look at another example. A man called Suhail dies, leaving behind his wife Yasmin, his daughter Dina, and a full brother named Yunus. Before the inheritance can be distributed, his daughter Dina dies, and she herself leaves behind a husband, Danish, and her own daughter, Dura. Pause the video if you want to try to calculate the shares yourself. So once again, we first calculate the shares when Suhail dies. In presence of a daughter, the wife Yasmin inherits a Quranic share of 1/8. Dina, the daughter, inherits a Quranic share of 1/2. And Yunus, the full, inherits the residual share of 3/8. When Dina dies, her share of 1/2 is redistributed amongst her heirs. Her mother, Yasmin, inherits a share of 1/6 of the 1/2. Her daughter, Dura, inherits 1/2 of 1/2. Her husband, Danish, 1/4 of 1/2. The remainder is 1/12, which the paternal uncle Yunus inherits. After adding all the shares for each heir, the final distribution is 5/24 for Yasmin, 6/24 for Dura, 10/24 for Yunus, and 3/24 for Danish. Here is another example. In this example, Suhail dies, leaving behind his wife Razia, his daughter Reem, and his son Roshan. Before the inheritance can be distributed, his son Roshan dies as well. So once again, we calculate the share when Suhail dies. Suhail's wife Razia inherits 1/8, and the remaining 7/8 is distributed among his son Roshan and his daughter Reem in a ratio of 2:1. Roshan gets 14/24 and Reem gets 7/24. When Roshan dies, his share of 14/24 is redistributed amongst his heirs. His Razia inherits 1/3 of 14/24, and his full sister 1/2 of 14/24, both as Quranic heirs. The doctrine of al-Rad is applied. Both the mother and full sister are entitled to the Rad. The mother's share is increased to 2/5 from 1/3, and the sister's share is increased to 3/5 from 1/3. We sum up shares allocated to each heir, and the final distribution is 43 over 120 to Razia and 77 over 120 to Reem. Let's look at one final example. In this example, Suhail dies, leaving behind his father, Saad, his mother, Sadia, and 2 daughters, Hadil and Hafsa, as the only claimants to his estate. Suhail also has an aunt named Sajda. Before the inheritance can be distributed, one of his daughter, Hafsa, dies. This is immediately followed by the death of his mother, who also leaves behind a full sister, Sajda. The family tree diagram shows the potential heirs and their relationships to the deceased. Let's firstly calculate the inheritance shares when Suhail dies. In the presence of daughters, Suhail's mother and father both inherit 1/6 share as Quranic heirs. The two daughters, Hadil and Hafsa, together inherit a Quranic share of 2/3. When Hafs dies, her 1/3 share is redistributed amongst her heirs. Her paternal grandmother, Sadia, inherits 1/6 of 1/3. Her paternal grandfather, Saad, excludes the full sister, Hadil, and inherits the remainder of the estate, that is, 5/6 of 1/3. When Sadia dies, her inheritance share, which is 1/6 of 1/3, is redistributed amongst her heirs. 1/2 of it goes to her son's daughter, Hadil, 1/4 of it to her husband, Saad, and the remainder to her full sister, Sajda, as residuary heir. We then sum up the shares allocated to each living heir, and the final distribution is 8/18 to Hadil, 9/18 to Saad, and 1/18 to Sajda. This brings us to the end of this session. Insha'Allah, see you in the next one.